Hey, I'm Jerry, and I want to welcome you to Permission to Love. It's a podcast, a channel based on how do we learn to move from shame to self-love and the power that self-love has to heal us and to transform our lives. So thank you for taking your time, for showing up here, watching this. So I'm currently in Sao Paulo, Brazil, recording this, and I've got a noisy dog next door barking, like in downtown Sao Paulo. I got motorcycles driving by, making noise out there, and so apologies for that, but stick with me. I think we can get through this together today. So what does it mean to give ourselves permission to love? And what are some of the barriers that are keeping us from being able to do that? And once we are able to love ourselves, what happens in our life? What are the transformational things that begin to show up as a result of doing that? You know, the reality is, I think that most people are walking around this planet shaming themselves, beating themselves up, and even trying to use that as a tactic to change themselves and to heal or to grow, thinking that if I just beat myself up enough, maybe something will change. Maybe I'll begin to become a better person. And we begin to believe that we're worthy of that type of treatment towards ourselves. And we become our own abuser. We don't grow, we just become our own abuser as a result of that. And that just becomes so destructive and begins to manifest in our lives. And things begin to show up like very unhealthy relationships because we have an unhealthy relationship with ourselves. We start to choose unhealthy relationships. We start to get into addictions and people pleasing and performance, workaholism, trying to overachieve. All of this becomes too much pressure on our systems. And eventually that stuff begins to fall apart. But it's the falling apart of all of that that is actually the gift. There's a treasure that's located inside of that. For me, that gift showed up over a 16-month period. You know, I grew up in a very abusive home of alcoholism and sexual abuse, physical abuse, poverty, and all of that just caused a lot of trauma in my system, but I didn't know I had trauma. I just thought things were rough, and I just thought that maybe I was a screw up and I didn't know how to live life because that trauma just began to play out in very strange ways in my life later on. So all of that began to implode over that 16-month period. All that trauma, all that shame had just built up. And the gift of life said, you need to deal with this. And so I had a heart attack. I went through an open heart surgery. I went to rehab because I was addicted to alcohol, and it was alcohol abuse because I wasn't dealing with my issues. I was medicating myself with alcohol. I then started going through a second divorce. Then COVID showed up, so I spent time in COVID isolation. Then had to go to rehab again. I mean, everything, you name it, it was happening in my life during that time. Well, that last day of rehab, man, I was committed to do whatever it took to figure out how to heal myself, how to transform my life, how to change. And something happened on my very last day in rehab. As a part of the graduation ceremony, they did this activity where they took a stone, and each person that was there would take the stone and say something encouraging and positive about you and to you. And at the end, they'd give you the stone, and then you had to do the same thing. You had to say something positive and encouraging about yourself. Well, when I got that stone, one, I was already overwhelmed and moved by all the words that had already been spoken to me. And I took that stone and I held it, and these words just came out of my mouth. I didn't plan them, but they just showed up. It said, I am worthy of my own love. I had never said that before in my life. Didn't even know I needed to say it. But when I said it, something shifted inside of me, and I realized that that was the issue, that that's what I was looking for, that I did not believe that I was worthy of my own love. Therefore, I didn't believe I was worthy of anybody else's love. I didn't believe I was worthy of God's love. I didn't believe I was worthy of love, period. And when I realized that I was worthy of my own love, it opened up my heart to be able to believe that I could receive the love from others, I could transform my relationship with life, and it set me on a journey to explore what self-love meant and how I could give myself more permission to love myself. So I set out on a journey. I sold my house, I became a nomad, I traveled the world, spent weeks in the Amazon jungle, I tried traditional and non-traditional forms of therapy, I took up crazy things like skydiving and mountain climbing, began to practice meditation and mindfulness, all of it as a way to go inside and to figure out inside what was it that needed to heal and how could that heal. And what I discovered is how we heal, how I heal, is through the power of my own love. That right below the layer of all that shame, all that negativity, all of that trauma is my authentic self. And that authentic self is love. And love is the greatest force to bring transformation to anybody's life. And when we can give ourselves love, I mean, we're with ourselves 24/7, so if there's somebody that we want to receive love from, it ought to be ourselves. And it is that space of our authentic self that loves us deeply, that sees our suffering, and even uses that suffering to awaken us to the fact that we are in there, that authentic self that is love. And then once we awaken to that, we can then figure out how to resurrect or unleash that love in our life, and then figure out the practices of self-love that begin to transform us going forward and transform how we even engage in life itself. And I promise you, once that happens, once you realize that you're worthy of your own love, you give yourself permission to love, and you start to act and think and feel love towards yourself, everything begins to change. I mean, everything begins to change. All of the healing that you've been looking for is right here. Every attempt that you've made to look for it out here has been, in some ways, a way to awaken us, to drive us back inside. It teaches us this is where we need to go. This is the source of healing. This is the source of life. This is the source of transformation. You are your own healer. Your own love can transform your life. You just have to give yourself permission to do it. So for this episode, all I want to do is set the baseline that 1, you are worthy of your own love. 2, you can give yourself permission to love. And 3, when you unleash that love and you give yourself permission to love yourself, everything will change. So we identify this problem that we're abusing ourselves, we're treating ourselves terribly through shame and the inner critic and the activities of our life because of a gap that we have of self-love. And the solution to that is giving ourselves permission to love ourselves. So I want to thank you for taking time to watch this episode. If you liked it, please subscribe, share it with other people, and come back because we're going to talk a lot more about this journey, and I'm excited to build a community with people around this journey of loving ourselves and moving from shame to self-love and transforming our lives as we discover that we are our own healers.